The question posed by the current crisis is simple. Who runs the world versus who makes it run? And what is revealed, now more than ever, is that everyday working people are the ones who make the system go. After all, who treats the COVID patients and who disinfects the hospitals? Who drives the buses that take us to work? Who loads and ships the goods we order? Who packs our groceries and who delivers them? Who harvests the crops, processes the food, and transports it to stores? Every step of the way, it is workers who are essential to the functioning of this system. And every step of the way, the politicians, CEOs, and billionaires have exposed themselves as nothing more than incompetent parasites. And it's not just our labor. This crisis also reveals the solidarity of ordinary people during a disaster. It's teachers delivering food to students' doorsteps. It's the nurse who decided to print family photos to take into COVID patients in the ICU. It's the neighbors who deliver groceries to the elderly and organize mutual aid networks. It's the sewers repurposing quilting fabric, shower curtains, t-shirts, and coffee filters to handcraft masks for the community. This is the human response of the 99%. And it couldn't be more starkly opposed to the response of the 1%, who care only about reopening their economy, no matter the growing body count. In the United States, it's all too easy to pin the blame for this disaster on Trump. After all, he's a buffoon, a neon orange clown who wonders aloud about injecting bleach into our bodies to fight the coronavirus. But the whole political structure on every level has demonstrated its complete incapacity to deal with this crisis and to protect the lives of the majority. Instead, their major interest has been protecting the profits of the corporation. Just consider Governor Cuomo of New York, whose steady performance has led some to laud him as a hero. But when he talks about the overload on New York's medical system, he doesn't mention how he has ruthlessly cut the budget for healthcare during his 12 years in office, reducing hospital beds in New York State from 72,000 to 50,000. Even now, in the middle of this crisis, Cuomo proposes a brutal cut of $2.5 billion from the state's budget for Medicaid. In Hawaii, the Democratic governor is preparing to cut public employees' salaries by 20% in the fall. In California, where the Democrats control the legislature and the governor's seat, they're considering a 15% funding cut to an already starved education system. And because capitalism is a global system, the response doesn't look that much different anywhere else. In France, years of funding cuts to the healthcare system left hospitals without the staff, equipment, or the PPE necessary to tackle this crisis. The bodies have piled up so quickly that the largest food market in the country is now a morgue, a way station for countless corpses. In Brazil, where several cities are close to running out of coffins to bury their dead, the president responded to the dramatic jump in cases by saying, "So what?" And at the same time that Trump stoked anti-Asian violence and racism in the United States by repeatedly referring to the virus as the, quote, China virus, in India, right-wing Hindu nationalists have pinned the blame on Muslims. Hashtag Corona Jihad is the trending hashtag, and a member of the Prime Minister's party even suggested shooting Muslims for spreading the virus. Everywhere, across the globe, the response is the same. The goal of those who run the system is not the preservation of human life, but the protection of capital at all costs. After all, capitalism knows only one law: ruthless and unceasing expansion, no matter the cost to people or the planet. And because capitalism is an international system that crosses all borders, we have a global ruling class that runs the world for profit, and profit only. They are vampires feeding at the trough of our suffering, engorging themselves on our misery. Consider this: in the same period that 30 million people lost their jobs, the CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, saw his net worth increase by $25 billion. I want to say that one more time. As food bank lines in some cities stretched over 2 miles long, Jeff Bezos got $25 billion richer. The bellies of poor and working people emptied and his pockets fattened. And he's the rule, not the exception. While the pandemic has decimated our society, the wealth of the billionaires has soared ever higher, increasing by $280 billion from March to April. The first stimulus package in the US rang in at a reported $2 trillion. But in reality, large corporations can use the initial pot of money to take out loans amounting anywhere to between $4 and $8 trillion, while ordinary workers and small business owners face financial ruin. But while the crisis has made clear that there's a global ruling class that runs the world in the name of ever-increasing profits, it has also reinforced an even more important truth. There is another force that should know no borders: the international working class. So today, we're coming together to celebrate International Workers' Day. It was born out of the struggles of US workers in the 1880s. Big capitalists brutally exploited workers, including children, and forced many to work 12 or more hours a day. So in May 1886, workers in Chicago and throughout the country took to the streets to demand an 8-hour workday. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what you will was their slogan. Hundreds of thousands of workers, organized and ready to fight, poured into the streets, and in Chicago, they battled the police. This fight in the 1880s resulted in many workers winning the 8-hour workday. Since the early 20th century, workers all over the world have marched and rallied on May Day to celebrate the struggles and victories of the international working class. Now, more than ever, with workers facing challenges like COVID-19 and climate change, we need global solidarity and a convergence of working class struggles. That's part of why we're here today, to come together and see that in the midst of all of this suffering and despair, we also see signs of the resilience, creativity, and fighting spirit of workers everywhere. In Detroit, bus drivers initiated a one-day strike to protest unsafe working conditions. Within just 24 hours, their demands were met, including the hiring of more cleaning staff to disinfect the buses, as well as access to restrooms, gloves, masks, and disinfectant wipes. Healthcare workers have also led the way. There have been at least 3 demonstrations at Kaiser medical facilities in the Bay Area alone. On May Day, healthcare workers planned demonstrations at 139 hospitals in 13 states across the US. In the words of a Fresno nurse, "We want to be here every day. We want to be taking care of our patients. We just want to do it safely." Healthcare workers have fought for themselves and their patients, not just in the US, but across the world. There have been demonstrations everywhere from Bogota to the Bronx, from Zimbabwe to Brazil, from Kansas City, Missouri to the city of Quetta in Pakistan. In Los Angeles, cooks and cashiers at McDonald's walked out after one of their coworkers tested positive for COVID. They demanded a 2-week quarantine with pay. As one worker said, "We've been pleading for protective equipment for more than a month now, but McDonald's is just putting its profits ahead of our health. We don't want to die for a McDonald's burger and fries." In Ciudad Juarez in Mexico, workers have initiated strikes at several factories to demand a shelter in place with 100% of their salary. As one worker proclaimed, "Our life is not a game. It's not a toss-up. We want a quarantine with 100% of our wages." In Michigan, workers at a Fiat Chrysler plant walked off the job because they didn't even have hot water to wash their hands. At an American Apparel factory in Selma, Alabama, workers walked out of the plant to protest unsafe conditions after coworkers fell ill. As one worker put it, "The CEO came here and said, 'If we don't like the rules, there's the door.' So today, we took the damn door. The virus is real, but we had to show them how real we are too." And this is just a brief sampling. The list could go on and on across the world. Over and over again, the coronavirus has shown that those who run the society are both unwilling and unable to take the necessary steps to protect people. It has been the workers themselves who have had to fight to defend their health and lives. And when we take a look, not just at the past 60 days, but the past 12 months, there's been a global explosion of protests this year, of people refusing to accept the conditions created by this system. In Chile, decades of austerity and privatization have led to tremendous inequality and poverty. After the government hiked subway fares by 30 pesos, Millions of people took to the streets in protest. Their slogan was, "It's not about 30 pesos, it's about 30 years." In France, the Yellow Vest movement, made up of poor and working people and small business owners, protested rising taxes and the cost of living. They demonstrated every Saturday for almost a year, followed by a movement against the French government's attack on workers' pensions. In Sudan, after the government tripled the price of wheat overnight, students, workers, and women's organizations came together. They forced the dictator Omar al-Bashir from office after nearly 30 years in power. A popular slogan of the movement was, "Freedom, peace, justice. The revolution is the choice of the people." Today, we stand at the abyss. The climate crisis and this pandemic show us that two options remain: save capitalism or save humanity and our planet. The choice has never been more clear. It's never been more stark. The billionaires offer a bleak vision of the future: massive unemployment, hunger, misery, and suffering on an unimaginable global scale. But we don't have to accept their system. So we're here together to celebrate the potential and the power of poor and working people everywhere, and of the fight we face to transform our world. If you feel anxious, overwhelmed, and terrified by this crisis, you're not alone. But we must also recognize that this is also an incredibly important time period. We have to feel the urgency of this moment. The organizing that we do now, the efforts that we make to bring people together, to stay connected, that is what will determine whether we're ready to confront the situation ahead of us. The organizers' networks that we build today can help to lead the struggles of tomorrow, but they must offer a different perspective. So let's fight for a transformed world, a collaborative, cooperative society run by everyday working people in the interest of human life and the living planet. As Nelson Mandela once said, "It always seems impossible until it's been done."